Hey there, I'm Reese, and welcome to the second installment in my quest to draw all 18 Project Voltage Miku type designs. I went over what those are a bit more in the first video of this series, but as a quick TLDR, Krypton and the Pokemon Company collabed and are collabing to make Hatsune Miku and Pokemon crossover media, mostly in the form of character designs, illustrations, and songs. So, with that out of the way, let's get right to the drawing. Grass, huh? One of the first three types that players will ever see in Pokemon, unless you played Yellow or Let's Go or maybe a spin-off first, but a type of great importance to most Pokemon journeys nonetheless. I'm sure some would say it loses points for the amount of weaknesses it has and the types it's resisted by, but I'm an artist, not a competitive Pokemon person. Honestly, this was a really difficult type for me to pick a favorite from. My first starter in blue was Bulbasaur, so while it's not the Pokemon I ended up going with for this drawing, I still have quite a love for its evolution line as a whole. Another nostalgia pick I considered putting here was actually Tangrowth. I played and replayed Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Almia a lot as a kid, so that first quest with the Tangrowth just really sticks in my mind. But in a more general sense, the variety of plants in our world alone is an expansive breadth of flashy colored and oddly shaped inspiration to choose from, with many having behavior that may seem strange to the many who understand plants as things that just sit there and soak up sun. Most of us know of at least the existence of carnivorous plants, but I think for a lot of people, first learning that some plants do things like trapping prey sounded crazy or unreal at first. Turning something that already does what we don't generally expect of a plant into a creature seems like an obvious choice, and Victory Bell and its pre-evolutions are a great example of this. I'd say pitcher plants are the most well-known carnivorous plant behind the Venus flytrap, and arguably easier to turn into a Pokemon design, especially considering the limitations of Gen 1 sprites and the differences in design philosophy as the IP has progressed along the years. It would have probably ended up too close to Cloyster's silhouette, with the fact that it has the spiky bits on its sides. Side note, fun fact I learned about Cloyster. In red and green, it's depicted as upright, like how it is in most gens. In red and blue, the front sprite is on its side, but the back sprite is still the same as red and green version. In yellow, it gets turned upright again, but the new sprite becomes weirdly green, while retaining the more purple back sprite from red and green still. We did eventually get a Venus flytrap Pokemon come Gen 4 in the form of Carnivine. While it doesn't have a full evolution line to go with it like Victory Bell does, I think it stands alone pretty well. If anything, I could see maybe a pre-evolution. There hasn't been a baby Pokemon boom since the generation Carnivine was originally introduced, so maybe Gen 10 will be when we get more babies again? I'm not too optimistic about that though, as I'd say most Pokemon from more recent generations take the full line into account from the start more often. The only baby Pokemon we've gotten since the last boom was Toxel, and it's one of only 3 baby Pokemon that were introduced in the same generation as their evolution, with the other 2 being Riolu and Togepi. But back to carnivorous plants. I've seen a few people hope that we get a grass type based on a sundew plant, which I agree would be super cool. The Drosera family is one of the largest groups of carnivorous plants, so if anything, I'm more surprised we haven't gotten one yet. Among the approximately 194 species in the genus, they all use mucilaginous glands along their leaves in some way. Generally, the leaves are covered in these tiny tentacles that have droplets of the liquid secreted, which is called mucilage, resting on top of them. These sticky droplets are how it both lures and traps its prey, curling the leaf around the bug to ensure that it can make as much contact with its food as possible. There's even separate glands to secrete a different liquid that allows it to digest the soup that the bug turns into. I know we already have a ton of grass Pokemon that boil down to lures prey with nectar and eats them, but I think that's kind of just the fate of a lot of grass types by virtue of that's how plants work. Most species of sundew in the northern hemisphere form something called a hibernaculum, which in the case of plants is a winter bud that is also produced by butterworts and some aquatic plants. They essentially shove all of their leaves and important bits into a little ball, which makes them sink below the water with the cold weather. Then, once it's springtime, they begin to enlarge, which allows air bubbles to form, and this floats them to the surface. I could totally see a bulb-like first stage and then an evolution being closer to the plant once it's grown. I could see an argument that Marini and Toxapex already cover some of the design elements, especially when Toxapex is raising its legs. However, there's definitely a large enough variety of sundews for them to choose for inspiration. The one I see most often is the Cape sundew, and is a bit more spread out than some of these other examples that I've shown. The main leaves are all lower on the body of the plant, while the flower is far taller. All of that being said, that would probably be better explored in a dedicated Phagamon video or something, so I'll wrap this bit up with a Flabebe taped to a stick on top of a Toxapex. But I guess at this point I should probably start talking about the Pokemon that I actually did draw for this challenge. The thing is, I really don't have the same kind of history with Blossom like I do with Gardevoir from the last video. I mentioned towards the start that grass was a really difficult type for me to choose a favorite. Partially because grass is a type where I think most of the Pokemon easily hit the mark of their design inspirations, even if they don't 100% appeal to me. There's a really nice variety between cool, cute, and strange, each with their own strengths that they play into. Most of the Pokemon in the grass type I would consider myself to have a neutral, leaning positive opinion on, save for the handful that I just personally don't like. Rillaboom, for example, is a case of a Pokemon where the design does exactly what it was meant to. It's just not a vibe that was meant for me. And in all honesty, there's probably more that I could say about a lot of grass Pokemon that aren't Blossom, because there's so many with really interesting design origins. I want to say that there's some nostalgia from seeing it in the show or something, but I admittedly can't recall any show appearances that stood out to me. I didn't tune into the anime very often, so my memories of it are rather scarce and fuzzy in general. Most of why I like Blossom really just boils down to that it's cute. And now we're gonna step back a little bit from the Pokemon aspect and talk a bit more about the drawing part of this. For the most part, I'd say this piece went pretty average, or at least expected. There was a bit of fiddling with the sketch, of course, but that's absolutely par for the course. The sketch is the perfect time to fiddle to your heart's content. It wasn't until I got to the pom-poms that I hit my first roadblock. Pom-poms aren't something I've drawn before outside of a messy sketch, so figuring out how to portray all the volume and layers with line art and such was a bit of a daunting task. For my first attempt, I tried using a radial symmetry ruler to see if I could at least block out the shapes. This looked flat as hell and much more like a wall decoration than a pom-pom. In some of the artwork of the design, it seems like the artist mostly used a square or maybe a pentagon brush to establish each layer, which is definitely a great way to do it, but blocking like that just doesn't click for me a lot of the time. So back to the drawing board I went, though I kept my original guideline approximations of where each layer of the pom-pom should reach. Then I treated it more like a clock, I guess, would be the best explanation. Or if I was drawing a wing in a circle, I kind of just built each frond out in a round. I'm not sure how much sense that makes, but the trial and error of it definitely paid off. Past the pom-poms, there was another bump in the road. While the hair of this Miku design is super cute and absolutely fits the theming, it was kind of a nightmare when it came time to shape. In a cel-shaded style like the original artist, it seems a bit more straightforward how the shapes and volume are presented in the more funkily shaped sections. Most of what I struggled with was trying to figure out the hair direction in said sections, especially at the point where the pigtail becomes the bottom puff and the little starbursts at the end of her face framing pieces. It took a lot of sleeping on it and doing and undoing my work to get all of those bits sorted out. While there's definitely a few things here and there that I probably could have tweaked, I am pretty satisfied with where it ended up. I'd like to take the last bit of this video to talk about the expectations of this series going forward. The information I've given has been a bit spread across multiple spots, so since I have the time here, I thought I might as well go over it. Main video releases, like the one you're watching now, will be coming out every other Friday, which may seem a bit spaced out for a series where each video is just one illustration, but I do have my reasons. Since this is my first project of this scale, I want to spread it out in a way that is realistic to actually achieve. I do just about everything that goes into these videos myself, so it does take a significant amount of time to get it done. The 2-week period gives me the time I need to illustrate, script write, find appropriate background music, record voiceover, make any other assets, and edit the video together. I considered running on a weekly schedule, but my main concern is that the illustrations would then suffer in quality from short deadline pressure. This also allows me the ability to potentially make other stuff in between without being as concerned about being able to get the main series video out on time. But with that, the drawing of this week is completed. Hooray! Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end here. Let me know what your favorite grass type Pokemon is, and I hope to see you next time.